How much does it cost to blindly encourage someone to follow their dreams? This is a story about how my first book was published through a Vanity press and why I regret it. I've been, I'd like to say, a writer most of my life, at least from those early days where you write a short story and your English teacher says, "Look, everyone, what a great example of writing this is," and as a young person, you think, yes, this is my identity now. I have always enjoyed writing fiction. I've always enjoyed writing short stories. I've always enjoyed writing nonfiction, just opinion pieces and blurbs. And just the act of writing has always been enjoyable to me. So, 20s, in my 20s, I had a series of wacky misadventures that were winding down. And as all people in their mid 20s do, I began to wonder what I was going to do with my life other than just be kicked around by circumstances. And I always kind of knew that I wanted to be a writer. So, in between all my jobs and just being a crazy young person, I wrote a rough draft of my first novel, which isn't the novel that I have published now. It's something else, and it's terrible. It's awful. But everyone I knew was super positive, super supportive. They're like, I was told in really no uncertain terms, pretty much my whole life, that all I had to do was publish a book. If I'm such a gifted writer, right? All I have to do is just publish a book, and fame and fortune would just flow towards me naturally because I'm such a gifted writer. So when I moved back to my hometown, uh, I talked to some friends of family. It turns out that there was a Vanity press company in town, and we had friends of the family who owned and worked for that Vanity press. When they found out that I wanted to publish a book, they were so excited. Oh my God, we're going to publish your book. It was phrased or given to me as this idea that this was like a special deal that they were doing for me specifically because we were all such good friends. But this was also just the standard Vanity Press publishing system that they had. And I had enough self awareness to understand that the rough draft of that novel was truly unsalvageably awful. Even though everyone was very encouraging, it was clear that I'd have to start over again. And I was so disheartened by my first attempt at writing fiction that I began to toy with the idea of writing nonfiction. And that nonfiction turned into a series of short essays that turned into the final book, which was really just, I'm not going to tell you the title because it was published under my real name. It's got my face on it. We don't need to see it. The title of the book should have just been My Dumbass Opinions because they were not researched. It's basically just me using publishing as like my own little Twitter or Facebook platform, right? So I did it though. I put all these little essays together into something that resembled some sort of book. And this is where the Vanity Press came in. And they offered to, I might have gotten a proofread, but there was no editing. They said, "Oh, we have in-house editors." I never got an edit. They said we can do covers. I made my own cover because I'm very particular about that kind of thing. I did get a proofread, but nowhere along this whole process did anyone pull me aside and say, "Hey, you should really think about drafting these again," or even like, maybe you should add a little research into some of these opinions, back up your claims and your positions. It was just a pipeline. It was a grease pipeline from I have content to let's get this out. And one of the big things this Vanity Press really was hyping on was this new technology called print on demand. This is this is 15 years ago. And they're like, we can do print on demand. Print on demand means, you don't have warehousing costs and all this sort of stuff. This is why we're superior to corporate traditional publishing, because you can do print on demand. There's no warehousing costs. And then they're like, but you also have to go out and promote your own book, because we have a website. Well, we'll share it, but if you actually want it to sell, you got to go out and promote it. And they did like basic formatting, all for the low price of $2,000. Now, I'm poor. I've always been poor. I didn't have $2,000. My parents didn't have $2,000. But I was so convinced through the unconditional encouragement that I had gotten, not just from friends and family, but also from these professional publishers, that I was destined for greatness, that I put 1,000 of that $2,000 fee on a credit card, and I borrowed $1,000 from a friend to cover these costs. And we did it. We published it. Got my book out, put it on Amazon. We did a blast on the day of launch. I shot up to #1 in those categories that I put it in. And that was it. I sold, I think, probably about 20 copies of that book, almost all of them within a day or two of release. The inevitable crash after your first release, when you get that initial spike and then it drops off and nothing happens after that. And slowly I began to realize that perhaps I wasn't a golden child fated for greatness, but in fact I was just some dude who published a book of random opinions and took on significant debt to do so. I had to get a job, paid my friend back relatively quickly, but it took me years to pay that credit card off. I ended up spending probably another $1,000 or $2 just on interest rates through that credit card. So by the end of it, I had spent thousands of dollars to publish a trash book that the only person who liked it was my mom. I was mad, of course. I felt like I'd been lied to by everyone who supported me. I especially felt lied to by the Vanity press, who way oversold what they could do for me. And I was so disheartened. I was so heartbroken through that whole process of extreme debt. My first book was a failure. I had my name and my face on something that I became more and more ashamed of. Because that's what happens when you publish a book of your opinions change over time. And the more that I read and the more that I educated myself, every time I picked that book up and I flipped through it, there were more and more things that I found myself disagreeing with in my own book. And it's out there forever. So the only real important lesson I learned from that is just how important it is to produce something that you're going to be proud of for your life, because you can't take it back. If you're wondering why I have a bias towards self-publishing over Vanity and corporate publishing, this is definitely a big reason why. I was so distraught, I was so jaded that I did not write anything creative for 10 years after that. That door shut, that door locked. I was done writing, I was done being creative, really, and I was done trying to make it as a writer or as an author. That was the end of it. So what happened 10 years later to make me start writing creative fiction again? Well, that's going to be the next video.